How has your mind been influenced this week by media, politics, or by individuals in your circle of friends or your workplace maybe? This week's episode is the second part of a two-part special on what influences our mind or mind manipulation. And to revisit briefly what was in last week's episode, there we were looking at comparing nudging with manipulation techniques by cults. And we also looked last week at Chomsky's 10 strategies or techniques of media manipulation. I still won't call it media manipulation because it's really techniques or strategies that are employed not only by the media. So in this week's episode, we'll go deeper into personal and relational mind control, how it can show up in families, in workplaces, or intimate relationships. And we will also look at what we can do to recognize and respond to mind control or mind manipulation. The first part is about understanding manipulative mind control. Mind control, sometimes called psychological manipulation or brainwashing. What was the other word in the other episode? Mind reform? No, not mind reform, but thought reform it was. Sounds a bit like 1984, doesn't it? Mind control, sometimes called psychological manipulation or brainwashing, doesn't necessarily involve physical force. Instead, it relies on subtle psychological tactics that influence how someone feels, thinks, or behaves. And that can often happen even without their awareness. The psychologist Margaret Singer describes 6 conditions under which mind control takes hold. The first one is keeping the target in the dark. The victim doesn't realize they're being changed, but slowly adapt their behaviors to meet the manipulator's agenda. The second one is controlling the environment. Structure, rules, and constant tasks keep people too occupied to reflect or to resist. The third one is creating powerlessness. Separation from support networks erodes confidence as well as intuition and autonomy. The fourth one is rewards and punishments. Approval is given for compliance, disapproval for questioning or doubt. Number 5 is closed systems, meaning authoritarian structures where dissent isn't tolerated and the leader never loses. And the 6th one is objectification. That means victims are treated not as individuals, but as tools in someone else's story. While I was reading through these different conditions that were described by Margaret Singer, the psychologist, some examples might have come to mind, and I think we are experiencing some of those right now. One of the ones that came to mind was the closed systems, the authoritarian structures. Dissent isn't tolerated, which means you can't say openly what you want to say anymore. If you do, you might get punished by a jail term. Online safety bill in the UK, anyone? And there might be some in the States that are going through as well. I don't know if there was something going on in California, I think. Then there's this keeping people too busy to reflect or to resist. And that's often happening with mind-numbing TV programs, things like that. Netflix, Sky channels, Apple TV. I don't know how they're all called. I watch hardly any of that. I'm a true crime follower. I watch kind of things like that. But it doesn't stop me from critical thinking and from digging what's going on. They're creating powerlessness. I'm thinking of disabled people. Services for disabled people gets more and more reduced. Less and less people get support for their needs. That would be an example for the powerlessness. Again, the keeping people in the dark can mix with the controlling environments as well. Mind-numbing TV programs, reality shows, gossip stuff that keeps people occupied and not interested in any kind of self-reflection, reflection on what's going on in the world. Sometimes not even proper self-reflection, which is important for developing healthy self-awareness. So as we can see from the examples that I tried to make and the 6 conditions that Margaret Singer described, mind control isn't limited to cults. It can happen in families, in workplaces, and often in everyday environments. The common theme is control. The manipulator positions themselves as the director. Would dictator not be a better word for that? While others are cast into roles that serve their narrative. And let me add that it happened and was very obvious in periods of the 20th century. So let's look at some manipulative tactics to watch out for. Along the structured mind control, these are kind of everyday tactics that the manipulators use. The first one is charm. And charm is used as flattery or superficial compliments to disarm and influence. We have seen the love bombing example in cults, how they try to lure people in to show them their acceptance, their affection, their love, that they can offer a special place for them. All this to draw them into the workings of a cult. Then we have the silent treatment, which is withholding communication to punish or to coerce. In the back of my mind is ghosting as well. I'm not quite sure if that fits in the context in this one. It can, in some ways. In a business or entrepreneurial context, I can see that when people want to collaborate with someone and the other side just don't respond. But it's less in a context of punishing or coercing others. So I think ghosting in that context is not the same as the silent treatment that is stated here. We've got coercion as well, which is the use of threats or intimidation to control behavior or to get a person to do something that they might not necessarily want to do. I've got an example from more intimate relationships for this one. I've actually got 2 examples. One example would be one partner would say to the other, if you don't send me £500, I'll put these nude pictures of you on the internet. That's actually more blackmail, but I think blackmail could fit in with coercion quite nicely. And we've got a romance for example as well. There are a lot of vulnerable people that are falling for flattery from strangers because these people, they know exactly what to say to lure someone in. And it's men doing it as well as women doing it. It's not just one of the sexes that's doing it. It's both of them, just the same way. They lure the vulnerable people in. And when they've got them on their hook psychologically, they try to get money out of them. They try to coerce them. Well, not coerce them. They try to convince them to send some compromising pictures or do things like that, which gets that vulnerable person into a very dangerous position that they can be easily blackmailed or coerced into doing things that either harm them or doing things that ruin them financially, emotionally, psychologically. Then we have reasoning. Twisting logic to convince someone to comply. Example for this might be, you should do this even if it doesn't make sense, because it's for your own good, because it's for the greater good. Regression would be playing on past experiences or emotions to trigger desired responses. Do you really want to experience this again? Kind of referring to any kind of what's happening in the past. And then we've got debasement, which is to undermine self-esteem to make someone more dependent. And I added 2 more in there. One I've hinted at, I think in episode 8, and another one which is more often seen in context with regards to narcissism or narcissistic people. These two terms, gaslighting and the flying monkeys, are often used in the context of psychological manipulation and abuse. While they have different meanings, they are both tactics that a manipulative or abusive person, sometimes group, sometimes institution or organization, might use to exert control over a victim or more than one person. So gaslighting is a form of psychological abuse or manipulation in which a person makes someone else question their own sanity, memory, or perception of reality. The term allegedly comes from the 1944 film Gaslight, in which a husband systematically manipulates the wife into believing she is going insane. The goal of a gaslighter is to gain power and control over their victim by making them doubt their own judgment and intuition. This is achieved through a pattern of deception and confusing behaviors such as either outright lying, which means the abuser will lie to the victim, even when presented with evidence to the contrary, and the abuser will never back down. Another of these confusing behaviors might be denying reality. They insist that events or conversations that the victim clearly remembers never happened, or they may twist the story to their own advantage. Another behavior is to minimize feelings. They dismiss the victim's feelings, calling them, "Oh, you're too sensitive," or "Oh, you're crazy," when the victims, express valid concerns. And then, as they're spreading rumors, they might tell other people that the victim is mentally unstable to simply discredit the victim, to make it seem that you can't believe her, you can't believe him. Over time, this consistent manipulation can cause the victim to feel confused, anxious, isolated, and dependent on the abuser to define what is real. And the flying monkeys is a term which is very often used when it comes to narcissistic abuse and in the context. It refers to the people who do the bidding of an abuser or narcissist, often without realizing they are being manipulated. The name or the term flying monkeys allegedly comes from the minions of the Wicked Witch of the West in The Wizard of Oz, who carried out her malicious plans. A narcissist or abuser will recruit these flying monkeys to help them control, harass, and punish their victim. They might do this by spreading gossip and lies, which means the flying monkeys help the abuser with smear campaigns, with spreading rumors about the victim to damage their reputation and to turn others against them. The abusers might also do this by getting people to act as spies or messengers. The people may be used to gather information about the victim or to relay messages that further the abuser's agenda. The abuser might also do this by getting the people to guilt trip the victims. The so-called flying monkeys then might approach the victim with a seemingly innocent, well-meaning goal, but their true purpose is to manipulate them into a desired behavior or to get them to forgive, in quotes, the abuser. Flying monkeys can be anyone, including family members, friends, or co-workers. They may be manipulated through flattery, lies, or by being rescued, in quotes, by the narcissist, leading them to believe they are helping a victim. In other cases, they may also be narcissists themselves who align with a more powerful narcissist for personal gain. These tactics that I mentioned often make people feel the choices they make are their own, when in reality, the manipulator has carefully shaped the decision-making environment. In the next section, we are looking more at the coercive control in the more intimate relationships. So manipulative mind control also shows up as coercive controlling, which is a pattern of domination that strips away autonomy and creates dependence. And that can take many forms. There are physical assaults, violence or threats of violence to enforce obedience. There are threats which can be direct or implied, warnings that instill fear, such as harming loved ones or pets. There are insults and humiliation, which breaks down the self-esteem with constant criticism or mockery, very often in public as well, which can be even more embarrassing and humiliating. There is isolation, which means to cut off someone from friends or family to increase reliance and dependence, which obviously allows the abuser to have more control. Then there's the monitoring, like tracking technology, surveillance, or constant checking of activities. Where are you going? Who are you going out with? Who are you meeting? I know of a case actually where a person's phone went missing and suddenly appeared again, which can mean that someone else was snatching it to check to find out where they are, who they are with, who they are communicating with. Then there's financial control, which can be restricting access to money or creating debt under the victim's name, also to make them dependent. For some reason, Tina Turner comes to mind because when she was with Ike Turner, he seemed to control absolutely everything. And when she left him, she had only a few dollars, if not just cents, to her name when she ran away. She was an incredible woman, she was. And there's sexual coercion, which is pressure, using manipulation or threats to do with any kind of sexual activity, forcing people into things they don't want to do. And then there's the removing of autonomy, controlling the personal choices, even down to daily habits or products used. You can't wear this, you should wear that, we're not eating that in this house, don't cook that, we must do this, we must do that. The coercive control may be subtle at first, but over time it creates a climate of fear and dependency. A key red flag is the loss of ownership when your time, your money, your spaces, or even your own body may no longer feel like your own. The big question here is, what can you do? And I think recognizing these patterns is the first step to breaking free from manipulation. There are some tips that are mentioned here, and they might sound as if they're easy to do, but when you are in a trap of such relationships, it may sometimes be easier said than done to get out of them. So the tips, what you can do, include to identify and name the tactics that are being used. To build self-awareness about your vulnerabilities. How can someone get to you? How can someone take over? Especially if you're in a vulnerable state, watch out for new people that are trying to flatter you and get you into, maybe coax you into some relationship. That can happen after a loss. That can happen after a divorce. Mind you, divorce can sometimes feel like a loss as well. It can happen at a difficult time in your life when you feel low down. And that's when the manipulative people, they have sometimes a nose for spotting vulnerable people like that. And they try to latch on. Don't be afraid to seek support from trusted people outside the controlling relationship. And sometimes maybe people completely independent, like in organizations that might help abused people or people who experienced manipulation. They might be the best ones to approach. Sometimes people in closer circles or relatives, they might get afraid that they get dragged into something and fear for their safety as well. It is a difficult situation, really, but the important thing is to reach out and seek help. Then another one is to set and enforce clear boundaries. And if your partner, your intimate partner, is trying to get through those boundaries all the time, then that should definitely be a warning sign to get out and away from the person. Another thing is to practice assertive communication, to express your needs and your opinions without fear. If that creates hostile reactions from the other side, that is another warning sign. Challenging a manipulator when it's safe to do so, that is one to approach with caution, I think, because depending on the manipulator, what they have done before, it could end up in a way that you might not want to go. That could turn violent, it could turn deadly in the worst case. And importantly, seek professional help if needed from counselors, therapists, or support organizations. They can help you create safe strategies to end controlling systems. Controlling systems is a little bit difficult if your whole country is a controlling system. That seems to instill some sort of unhealthy environment. Let's call it like that to be diplomatic. So to conclude, mind manipulation isn't just a matter of theory or history. It's something people live through every day, whether in families, workplaces, relationships, or the general environment. And by understanding the signs of psychological control, we can protect our autonomy and support others who may be trapped in controlling systems. It gets difficult to get out of a controlling system, in quotes, when the system, in quotes, is kind of a whole society, or not the society itself, but the governance of a society, for example. If we would stick together on a level as humans that can see what is going on, we could create a big, powerful community. And that brings us to the end of this week's episode of Exploring Brain and Mind. Share the episode with people to raise awareness. Follow and subscribe to Exploring Brain and Mind on Apple and Spotify, Amazon Music and YouTube. And please download the episode as well. Downloads are very important for us podcasters. And I hope you tune in again to the next episode.